Hi everyone. Welcome to another insightful session that we have for all of you today. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all those who've joined us. And I'm Manish Krishnan, Head of Marketing here at QKS Group. I welcome you all to today's session on CAIO Imperative, Driving AI Transformation, Balancing Scale, Governance, and Impact. Once again, thank you for joining us today. Enterprises today are accelerating AI adoption at an unprecedented pace. But as we move on to 2026, the real challenge is no longer ambition, it is execution at scale. Many organizations are finding that moving from successful AI pilots to enterprise wide deployment requires rethinking governance, operating models, and accountability. Today's session, we'll explore where AI initiatives break down, the trade offs between speed, governance, and impact, and what CAIOs and CDOs must redesign to deliver measurable business outcomes. I'm pleased to introduce our speakers for today. Devendra Pejanis, Practice Director for Data Analytics and AI. We have Amandeep Singh, Associate Director and Principal Analyst here at QKS. Along with them, we have Arun, Principal Analyst for Data Management Domain. Together, they will share a practical perspective how organizations can scale AI responsibility while maintaining governance and driving real impact. We encourage all of you to raise any query that you may have throughout the session in the Q&A section below, and we'll surely address them towards the end of the session today. With that, let's get started, and over to you, Devendra.
Hey, Anish, thank you very much. And I think you're making already my job a little easier because what you gave was a very fantastic introduction of the topic. So maybe the next time I should get you on this panel to talk a little bit about the CAIO imperatives, Anish. So
That'll be
thank,
fine.
thank you very much. So good morning, everybody, and welcome. It is genuinely a good place to have this room because the conversations we are going to have is not most webinars lead with. I've been on a few webinars recently, and the conversation today we're going to have is completely different from what I have been, at least in the past few webinars on topics related to CAIO imperatives. And what I mean by this is, most AI discussions that I have been part of in 2026, they start pretty much with technology. They talk with models, platforms, infrastructure, all the technical bit, and don't get me wrong, none of that is unimportant, but what we are going to talk today starts probably with one level higher. It starts with execution. It talks about accountability. It talks about operating models, decisions that determine whether the AI within your organization has invested in actually delivering anything that a CFO or a board would recognize as a value. So the theme for today's session is this gap between AI ambition, that all of us have, and the AI execution that we all want to have has never been wider. And the organizations that close it in 2026 will really set, the kind of competitive trajectory for the rest of the year and pretty much for the rest of this decade. So what we have designed this session specifically is for the leaders in this room, be it a CAIO, be it a CDO, or be it a conventional CIO. The leaders who sit at the intersection of AI strategy and the organizational reality. We are the people who make this work, not on a whiteboard, but really within our enterprises with real constraints. All of us have constraints, and with a real accountability pressure. So if that's okay, let's just get into it, But before that, I want Amandeep, if you can just run a quick poll for our fantastic audience.
Sure. So yeah, I think the poll is live. So before we move on, we just wanted to have the alignment that what we are seeing in the market versus what you feel is on the same line, and then we can just pick on the our webinar today. So what is the single biggest challenge your organization is navigating in its AI transformation journey right now? What is that? So we have so many people, and would love to understand where do you feel is the most challenge. Is it in defining clear ownership, translating AI performance into outcomes? Is it balancing innovation velocity, or aligning AI data technology and scaling what works in pilot? So would love to understand your perspective on that. And see, I guess we are on the same track, because a lot of awards is coming actually from translating AI performance into the outcomes. That's the main problem. I think we are well aligned with this views, and our webinar forward talks on these line. And yeah, happy to take this as this. Perfect. Devendra, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Aman, and thanks. Really appreciate you helping me with this poll, and I'm not surprised with the response, Amandeep, on the poll. So moving on, I really want to get into what I believe is the most important framing for everything that follows. And that's what I really call it as the honest reality, of where most enterprise AI programs sit right now. These are the three things that leadership is simultaneously being asked for to deliver, right? Either you accelerate innovation because the competitive window is real, and the cost of moving is rising slowly. Enforce governance because regulators are no longer asking this politely. They are coming very hard at us. And AI risk has really become a board level risk, in my opinion. And last but not the least, deliver business impact. Not the model accuracy, not how many lines of code your developer has written, but outcomes that a CFO can point onto a P&L, probably in an investor call. So the tensions between these three imperatives, the speed, the governance, and impact, has really become kind of the operating challenge for all of us, all CAIOs and CDOs that we talk to in 2026. As we conduct this research at QKS, we talk to a lot of CAIOs, and really the inflection point of all these three imperatives, scale, speed, governance, and impact, is something that's really makes it genuinely difficult. And there are no trade-offs, right? I mean, you have to resolve once all of these are permanently as competing forces. You build a governance process, innovation velocity drops, because the moment you innovate, your speed slows. You push for speed, the risk exposure climbs, because you take a hasty decision and risk comes with it. You report on model metrics, and then the CFO still says, I can't comment or I can't connect to the business. Yeah, your model is giving me 98% accuracy, but my P&L still shows the same number, right? So the leaders who are winning are not the ones who choose one of these criteria, right? The leaders, the successful ones, are the ones who are winning, are the ones who build an operating model that hold all these three simultaneously together, with the right tension between all of them. And that is pretty much, we are going to unfold as a challenge or as an unpacking that we are going to do today. So let me take you through what we are going to cover today, because the agenda itself is very exciting. So Anish, if you can move on to the agenda slide, please. Yeah. So on today's agenda, it's pretty much like a 6-part story that we have, and the 6 agenda items are pretty much kind of linked to each other. They're deliberately sequenced. They are not independent topics. They are pretty much what I call as a connected argument in itself. We'll start with kind of the execution reality, because I think from a CAIO perspective, I think execution reality is a number one challenge, where scale actually collides with the limit of most programs. Then we'll examine, what I just showed, the 3 core tensions, that no governance framework, no platform, or no headcount plan can resolve on its own. So they are kind of pretty much 3 siblings acting together. From there, we'll do a nice segue into the governance redesign, which is really a hot topic. Not compliance, but governance as a continuous operating mechanism. And I'll step on later on in the webinar to talk a little bit about that as well. And then we'll move into something which is very, very consequential, in my opinion, which is the organizational design decision in enterprise today, because the CAIO partnership with not just the CDO, but the rest of the CXO and the board is very, very important. And towards the end, we will also follow it up with measurement, specifically how to build an AI scorecard that our friend, our CFO, is really actually caring about. And then towards the close, we'll come back with pretty much strategic choices for 26, 2027, where to build, where to buy, how to think about AI transformation architecture, and kind of a quick preview on our execution playbook actually looks like. So a lot in store. But by the time we are through, really, Aman and Arun and my objective is to really have a clear view of that execution architecture, that separates organizations that are scaling AI today uh, from the one that are still managing a very expensive pilot portfolio, right? So that's pretty much the agenda over the next, I would say, 45 minutes. Let me hand over the next section to Amandeep, who will open with what I think is the most clarifying framework of the AI execution problem that I have seen in my 3 decades of research. The collision between what the enterprise has already invested versus what it has actually kind of produced, in my opinion. So, Amandeep, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Devendra. I think that's a great agenda, and I'm excited to take on these sessions. And so I've been a lot of on floor with a lot of organizations in their AI transformation journey, and I've collected a lot of things that were my takeaways from there, and I just wanted to have this in a structured format. So thank you, Devendra sir, and I would like to open this with a statement, and I think it captures the entire situation with most enterprises are actually in right now, and I want to sit with it for a moment. So I think it's most organizations are sufficiently invested to be accountable for results, but without the discipline to deliver them. That's what I think. So they're very well invested, to be accountable for results that is coming out, but they're not actually following the discipline to actually deliver it. So, and I think this is not a technology statement. It's more of a organizational diagnosis. So, because I think we are past the point where we are in an experimenting with AI phase is an acceptable posture from the C-suite level. Because if you will see, there are so many questions coming from so many directions. Boards are asking different set of questions. CFOs are asking different set of questions related to the ROI, and the answers cannot be pilot metrics or some proof of concept stories. The real questions are around what I am seeing were around where is the actual value. It's in what has actually changed in how business operates. What decisions have been better, what costs are lower, where risks are more visible. These are the areas of questions where a lot of investment discussions are going on with the folio. And when you honestly audit most enterprise AI portfolios against these questions, you'll find a larger gap. And yeah, this section is about understanding exactly why that gap exists, because you cannot close a gap if you have not clearly diagnosed it well. So let us start with the single most important data point in the enterprise AI right now. Anish? Yes. So approximately 85% of AI pilots never reach production. I want to say that again, 85%, and this is not just coming from like it's we have done a QKS VOC resonance, and most of you'll see that they were very excited when they started this pilot project, but it never moved to the production. And for the roughly 15% that do reach production, the cost to scale is 3 to 5 times the cost to prototype. And for example, in year one, organizations, they capture less than 20% of the intended AI value they projected when they, when they approved the investment. So here is what, the arithmetic means in practice is that your organization spent, seriously in capital building something. So you proved it works in a controlled environment. And then in the moment that matters the most, that is in the production, it stalled. And why? Because there are, I think, how I have seen it, I have defined into 3 bottlenecks. I think that destroy the production. and they are almost never the ones that people or leadership team is focused on. I think the first is data fragmentation. A lot of people indicates data shortage, but I think it's not data shortage, it's fragmentation, because silos domains with inconsistent schemas, no lineage, model trained on data that no longer reflects how business actually work today. The model was right when you built it, but the world moved on. And the model did not. It was still in that before that was trained. That is the first area, I think, that the bottleneck. The second I would take is the governance friction, because most enterprises have a risk review process designed for annual software releases, point in time audits and manual approvals. These processes are now being applied to the AI model similarly, that that AI model can be retrained weekly or even on daily basis, and that mismatch, I think, is the problem. And it's not a process problem. I think it's a structural incompatibility that is being at stake at there. And the third bottleneck, I think this one is perhaps the most dangerous one, because it's actually invisible, and it is the model drift. So production model that I've seen in that they deployed in production degrade very silently, because the business is shifting so fast. In any of the agnostic use cases I'm talking, the business shifts are much faster than earlier it was, and customer behavior changes continuously. So external conditions are evolving, and the model does not know that, because nobody is watching it. So until a business outcome goes wrong, and then everyone asks that why nobody caught it sooner. The honest answer for what I gave there was because the monitoring was not imbibed design in it. It was assumed that we could have monitored that. So there should be an entire different layer where the monitoring needs to take place. So the key insight that I want to take away from this slide is that the signs of stallness are visible before the stall happens, but most leaders doesn't see them. So, and very few act on them, because they're very optimistic about the pilot that they invest in the production discipline. So now this again brings me to a deeper question, and one that most AI programs, I think, get fundamentally wrong. Anish, is the hidden, I think it's the hidden cost of distributed AI decision making, right? Exactly. Now, yes, I think AI decisions will make you feel like it's autonomy, but it actually operates like an anarchy. And the costs are real. They compound, and they're largely invisible to a lot of people until they are impossible to ignore at a point of time. And what actually happens inside an organization that running distributed AI program without any central coordination. Let me take you through that. So first, the duplicated investment. So multiple business units purchase overlapping tools, build parallel data pipelines. They train redundant models for problems that are structurally identical for what they are already dealing with. And when organizations conduct honest deduplication audits, they routinely find that 40 to 60% was waste. And that is not margin optimization opportunity. That is capital that was deployed without governance. So that's the major problem. The second, if you ask me, that I discovered was inconsistent governance. Different now. If you leave, you have, okay, you decided that you might need to have a governance structure. You did, but again, inconsistent governance is also a problem, because different standard across different business unit create asymmetric regulatory risk. And when the regulator arrives, in this 2026, they will arrive, and it would like, we don't know, what our BUs are doing, and it's not defense. It's an aggravating factor. That's important. So once you have governance, you need to measure it consistently. And the third, it's related to more organizational structure and people landscape. It's talent fragmentation, because your best AI talent and the talent is genuinely scattered across dozens of unfunded business unit projects, none of which is large enough to attract the caliber of people you actually need. And I think none of which builds the institutional depth that compounds over time. The last one, I think one more is there. I think it's more important is the data foundation, because every business unit curates its own data layer, and AI models cannot share features, or they cannot leverage cross-domain signals, and enterprise intelligence never actually compounds. You're building value in silos, and the sum of the parts, they never exceed that individual silos part of that. And finally, what I see the most dangerous consequence is it's more related to emergence of an accountability vacuum. So you might say that what accountability? So if I'm creating, I'll be accountable, but that's not the case happening, because when an AI system fails, whether by generating harmful output or reinforcing some kind of bias, the issue is rarely the failure itself, but the lack of clear ownership around it, because it's not the one who's creating data. It's everyone behind who has owned different parts of it independently. So I think responsibility becomes diffused across teams, systems, and decisions, and what should be actually concerned, in a contained environment. So these costs are, I think, these are not are not hypothetical, but they're happening today in organizations that look from outside, and they are making and when organizations are making serious AI investments, they need to consider all these as a very important aspect of how their investments are going to turn up. So let us now turn the structural tensions that are driving this, and let me bring Arun. I think he will walk us through what I think are the three important balancing acts in enterprise AI we discussed with some of the organizations that we had worked around. Arun.
Thank you, Amdeep. And I think what you just laid out gives us the perfect foundation for what I want to address, right? So because these organization failures that do not happen in vacuum, right? They are the downstream consequence of three structural tensions, I must say, and that every CAIO or let's say CDO is navigating, and they often comes without a clear framework for doing so, right? So I want to be very direct about something before I go into the details. These tensions are not trade-offs you resolve once in a strategy session, right? So they are permanently competing forces, and organizations that perform best are the ones that build, let's say, a permanent engineering into their operating model to hold them in balance. So that's a fundamentally different mental model from how most organizations approach this, right? So let's look at each tension there. Anish. So the first tension is between speed and stability, right? So you can see this one sounds simple until it breaks something in production. Fast iteration is a genuine competitive advantage in AI development. The ability to experiment, test, learn, and deploy quickly is what allows organizations to build capability faster than competitors. But when fast iteration becomes operational liability, when you are breaking models in production every sprint cycle, because governance was treated as a finishing step rather than a design constraint. So you are not moving fast. You are creating technical and reputational debt that compounds. The resolution is not to slow down everywhere. It is deliberately engineered two zones. A sandbox environment where experimentation is fast, a low governance and genuinely exploratory, and a production environment where full controls apply to every model that touches a customer, let's say, decision, a regulated process. So speed is in the right place, governance is in the right place. But let's take a look at the second tension, right? So the second tension is between innovation and governance, and this one has a specific, very common failure mode: the compliance team. So the compliance team that reviews every model retrained on a weekly cycle becomes the single biggest bottleneck in your AI program. That is not a governance success story, actually. That is a governance design failure, I must say. The resolution is to move governance from an external gate into the development of workflow itself. Risk assessment embedded as automated checks in the CI/CD pipeline, not a queue that slows delivery. A check that runs alongside delivery and flags material risk before it reaches production, right? So, and the third tension, perhaps the most important one, is between the centralized AI authority and distributed business unit autonomy. So AI centers of excellence that hold decision making create two simultaneous failure modes. Everything moves slowly, and business units route around them. Both outcomes are expensive. So the resolution that actually works is centralized platforms, standards, and governance, federate use case ownership, experimentation, and local expertise. The center provides the infrastructure and the rules. The edge owns the outcomes, and this is not a compromise. It's actually a design. Now, understanding these tensions is necessary, right? So right now we understand we go to know what are these tensions, but we need to understand these tensions. So because there's a deeper error that sits underneath all these three, and it is going to articulate it with precision. Anish?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just like to take a moment here. So if all those who are attending us live today, if you have any queries, like I mentioned before, do feel free to drop in your questions in the Q&A section below. And in any time throughout the session, if you find that we are just moving a bit fast, or we are just, you're losing out on the track, feel free to drop it in the chat. We'll take the pace according to that. Yeah, over to you, Arun, again.
Thank you, Anish. Structural choices that matter more than tool choices, right? So now let me give you the single most expensive mistake in enterprise AI, and it is happening at scale right now in organizations that believe they are doing the right things. So organizations that are routinely investing, let's say, millions of dollars in tools and millions of dollars in organizational design, the ratio should be reversed, I must say. Here is why this matters so acutely. Most AI programs measure inputs, models built, data labeled, experiments run, compute consumed. But these are visible, right? These are countable, and these are reportable also. But they are not outcomes. And let's say the CFOs, they fund what they can measure only. If your AI team speaks in accuracy scores and effort metrics, the CFOs hears one thing: I do not know if this works. So the business impact narrative has to be built before the budget conversation, not during the conversation. So because by the time you are defending a budget, you have already lost the framing battle. So, and on the organizational question, every major AI scaling failure we see has an organizational design failure at its roots, not a technology failure. So the question is, which AI platform should we use? And is 10 times less important than the question, who owns AI outcomes in this organization? So operating model clarity unlocks tool value. Tool investment without operating model clarity destroys it. So let me say that again, because it is the insight I want you to carry out of this room. Operating model clarity unlocks tool value. Tool investment without operating model clarity destroys it. So, and the most dangerous belief in AI leadership today is, if we get the technology right, the organization will follow. It will not. The organization must be designed deliberately in advance for the technology to have anywhere to go. So with that structural diagnosis in place, let us move on to what we consider the most consequential operational redesign challenge: governance. Not as a compliance, as a continuous operating mechanism. So over to you, Jayendra, sir.
Yeah, Anish. Yeah, so I move into this topic, which is really a favorite of mine. Redesigning governance for AI scale. And why I call it my favorite, because it's often the most overlooked, because one considers this to be the most easiest. And as I was interviewing a very senior CAIO, I found her to make a very interesting quote, which I put up on the slide, which is: the governance model that protected your enterprise from bad software will not protect it from bad AI. So I think software governance, if you take governance around software and IT tools, is very periodic, whereas the AI governance is or has to be must be continuous. Software governance, on one hand, responds to what has been built, so it pretty much looks at the past. AI governance is really different. It must respond to what is happening in the present, what is happening today, what is in production. As it encounters the model that was not trained on, or as the business context shifts, the world changes as the way your training data responds. So pretty much, software governance is something about the past. AI governance is pretty much in the present. So this is not really a marginal redesign from past to present. It is what I call a very fundamental architectural shift in how this whole assurance around governance works. So as I segue into the next section, let me share with you what exactly that shift really looks like in practice, right? So on one end, you have the static compliance, the continuous assurance that we want to look at it. The static compliance on the left, most enterprises are running today, has really a very specific set of structural characteristics, and each one of them, if I can make a very provocative statement, is really a liability in an AI operating in an environment. And then why I say that, because point in time risk reviews, be it daily, monthly, quarterly, or annual reviews, applied to models that retrain weekly. Manual documentation, model cards that are created after the fact, that as a governance checkbox rather than living in an operational artifact. You create a compliance gate at deployment that functions as a queue, not as a quality check. Risk owned entirely by legal and risk functions that sit very far from the engineering teams that are really doing the work. And a binary outcome, whether it's approved or rejected, with no feedback loop into the development process. So if you look at all of these parameters, governance that slows AI velocity by 40 to 60% in our research at enterprise scale, without providing any continuous assurance that, be it the board or the senior staff, looks actually at. What does the continuous model really, or the continuous assurance model look like, right? The continuous model looks fundamentally very different. It looks at automated drift alerts so that any degradation is caught even before the model produces a bad outcome, not after. Governance is embedded as a code in every CI/CD pipeline. So the check happens really at the moment the change happens, not a week later where somebody finds an issue and raises a ticket. Automated model cards are generated on every release. So the documentation is always current, not like an IT model where you got to go and update a documentation after an issue resolves. So the automation always remains current. The documentation always remains current. And then the audit which follows is always ready. So you don't have somebody sitting getting ready for audit, because the audit is really real time. Risk scoring per deployment, not per review cycle. And as I come to the end of it, co-ownership is across the entire AI center of excellence, risk and engineering. So the governance is pretty much a kind of a shared responsibility, not really as an external gate to somebody. And the critical measure at maturity, at scale, is really a properly embedded continuous assurance model, and it does not slow down delivery. I think that's the very important aspect. It's pretty much part of the delivery. So on one end, you're looking at governance slowing down the delivery process. On the other end, you have governance, if not speeding up, running with the delivery cycle. So the goal is obviously not less governance, but the goal is governance that moves with the speed of AI. So that's where I kind of lean into, is governance at scale requires one thing that most organizations have not fully designed, as to who owns what when something goes wrong. And Anish, if you can move on, I'm going to kind of move into that section as to who owns what when AI outcome diverges from expectations. And pretty much this can be kind of answered in kind of three broad questions. Who owns the model outcome, who owns the model risk that we are talking about, and then pretty much who owns the model response. And then if I can just kind of segue into a little bit each one of them. So who owns the model response? And then the answer is pretty simple here. The model response is not owned by the platform team. It's not owned by the data science team. The model is owned by the business unit whose process the model is running. So if it's a model running for a marketing team, the model is pretty much owned by the CMO. If it's something to do with commercial sales downstream, it's pretty much the chief sales officer who runs it. The business unit that uses this recommendation to make a decision or to serve a customer or to own a supply chain pipeline, they own the outcome. That is where in our research the accountability is mostly missed, because pretty much the ownership on the model is kind of transferred to the data science team that built it. Who owns the model risk? I think that's another very interesting question that comes in. This one is a joint function. It requires an explicit charter, not an assumption. So kind of the AI COE defines the risk framework and validated by the technology team. Engineering implements it. The business unit pretty much signs off. So it's kind of a chain of event that happens. 4 distinct roles, 4 distinct contributions. I would say all of them necessary. None of them individually can run the model risk. And then who owns the model response when something goes wrong in production, something doesn't scale in real time? It's not a committee, it's not a task force. It has to be a named individual with kind of escalations, I would say, defined around authority. So accountability is not just a document, right? It's a real-time system of ownership, visibility, and it has to be redesigned and tested before you need it. I think before I hand over to Amandeep, who's going to talk about the organizational dimension, I think organizations need to ensure that governance without the org structure is architecture without any foundation. So with that, since I talked a little bit about organization, I think Amandeep would be a good person to come and talk about the CAIO, the CDO partnership. I think that's very fundamental to get this governance going on. So Amandeep, over to you, if you can just help me talk through this organization's redesign process.
So Devendra, I think that was a great one, and thank you so much. I think AI governance is one of my favorite as well. So as rightly mentioned, I think it's very important that people understand the importance of governing their AI infrastructure, their AI mapping that they're doing, but they're not very clear on how it's related to the org structure within an architecture layer foundation. So again, I want to build on your continuing to your point, Devendra, is that in my view, I think it deserves to be called out very directly that the most expensive point of friction in any AI transformation, sit between these two roles is that are expected to be naturally allies, is the CAIO and the CDOs. Because what we are seeing across the enterprise is that the tension it's not driven by individual, it's rooted in how roles are defined. The boundaries between data governance and AI governance are inherently interlinked, but are very rarely clarified, because data quality, it sits with the CDO, yet it directly determines AI performance. And investments in data engineering and machine learning draws from the same talent pool, creating more prioritization pressure. Even at the platform level, if you see, decisions around the enterprise data stack and AI model infrastructure are deeply interconnected, and it cannot made in isolation. When this relationship actually lacks clarity or alignment, the impact, I think, it's not just subtle. It shows up as sustained organizational friction, often stretching across more than 12 to 18 months, leading to delayed initiatives, overlapping investments, and more importantly, erosion of the confidence that leadership has done at a board level into this AI thing, into their AI map that they have present. So in contrast, the organizations are able to move with speed and discipline, that tend to address this upfront. They establish a clear, defined, shared charter between the CIO and CDO with aligned ownership data across models. Also surprisingly, I've seen, the same CDO person doing the same role as well of CIO. That is also, a lot of organizations are defining, the clarity between, the same persona is being given the two roles so that it can be maintain the the depth of what AI actually needs from the data it pulls upon. Because everyone knows the basic concept of AI is this garbage in, garbage out. So you need to fix the data foundation before you fix your AI output, right? So moving to that, let me show you how exactly that boundary should be drawn. Thank you, Anish. I've already taken that. So let me offer you the diagnostic lens for your AI center of excellence. Like, does it operates like a bureaucracy, or does it have to behave like a product, team? Because what I'm seeing is quite often in the COE that becomes a control layer, managing access, reviewing requests, and moving the cadence of governance forum. In practice, that model slows. I think it slows more down. So you're not just setting a CEO that could just take all the care of this as a control layer, because if you just put this CEO into the control layer, it will obviously slow down the organization down. It starts acting as an internal tax on the business units, which was it on the contractor side, was actually meant to enable and overtime those business units. So that was the main goal. So the organization gets right decision. Their AI COE, it's organized very differently. They run it as an internal product organization. There is a clear defined roadmap, committed delivery timelines, and well understood SLA performance, which is not measured by activity or throughput, but by tangible business outcomes. And most importantly, the COE is accountable to the business in the same way the product team is accountable to its customers. And when you break that model down structurally, a well-functioning COE typically rests on five pillars that we had defined. It's like governance and standards, platform and tooling, talent and capability development, use case prioritization, one of the most important, and measurement and reporting. So you need to have governance standards for that. The platform, what tools you're going to require for the platform, what are you choosing? Then do you have the right talent and capability development, and what are the use cases you're going to go hit with the focus, right? And then again, after you do that, you need to measure what you are doing and then report it obviously to the right stakeholders. Each of these is explicitly owned with a defined operating model and success metrics that are visible to leadership. Yeah. And on the talent side, it is important to recalibrate how we think about scarcity. The constraint is no longer pure technical, because organizations are steadily improving the ability to hire and develop AI engineering talent themselves. So I think the real gap sits elsewhere. It sits with the individual who can connect AI capability to business value in a credible operational way, because people who can engage a CFO and clearly articulate how a change in model perform translate into financial impact, people who can work with business leaders and identify which problems are genuinely addressable through AI and which are not. So these profiles, the translators between technology and business, are where this proportionate value is created. Yet in most enterprises, they remain significantly underinvested compared to core technical roles. Also, if you move next, I have the section 5, I guess, the CFO metrics problem. Yeah. So I want to open to set stage for this section. In my experience, I have that systems should be fundamentally changed in order to understand how AI programs should or can get evaluated, right? Because accuracy is not a business metric. What I mean by that is fairly straightforward. If your AI scorecard is not tied to the movement in the PNL, the second year, the funding conversion is already at risk, because at that stage the discussion shifts. The CFO is not evaluating model precisions. Devendra mentioned earlier, it's 98%, but it doesn't matter for a CFO, right? It needs the evaluation is about whether the capital allocated to the AI has translated into measurable financial return, and whether that return justifies continued investment. what we consistently observe is that, however, the gap in organizations approach this, many AI leaders are still measuring what is easily available. So that gap is where the challenge sits. It's not simply reporting issue. It reflects how the measurement framework itself be diagnosed without the structure that connects AI outputs to financial and operational outcomes. Even well performing struggle to or to demonstrate the impact. So let me move forward and give a deep dive into the layers that are important. So let me directly start with the layer one. So what we have seen in practice is structured measurement model that is layered. So starting with layer one, the technical hint, I think this is the foundation where your data science and engineering teams operate, tracking model accuracy, data freshness and inference latency. This is the foundation of that. And if you move from that to the operational impact, this is where the technical performance begins to translate into how work changes. Here the focus shifts to metrics such as decision automation rate, the frequency of human overrides, reduction in process cycle time. This is the impact. And then third is the business value, which is where the conversation becomes more materially important for sustained investment. This includes revenue directly influenced by AI, cost avoidance versus pre-AI baselines, payback periods. All is being taken care here at business value. And the strategic outcomes, looks at how deeply AI is being embedded into the enterprise. Metrics such as adoption across business units, time to production for new models, the percentage of decisions augmented by AI, experiencing improvements for new models. But all this is in terms of strategic outcomes. And the measurement is not just about individual programs; it's about portfolio discipline. So I would love to bring Arun for the strategic choices that they can make for in 2026. If you want to get Arun, can you throw some light on that aspect as well?
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
sorry, I took a lot of time explaining these layers, but this was so embarrassing that I just went into the flow.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Amandeep. So let me give you the framing for this final section, right? So the decisions you make in the next 6 months or 12 months will define your AI trajectory for next 5 years, let's say. So this is not hyperbole. It's the current rate of compounding in AI capability and competitive positioning. And the most dangerous thing about this moment is what the most leaders are making these decisions reactively. So in response to vendor pressure, or in response to, let's say, the board questions, or in response to what a competitor appears to be doing, reactive decisions is in a compounding environment are extraordinarily expensive to reverse. So this section is about the three decisions deliberately that makes versus buy decision, and the AI transformation architecture, and the roadmap of AI execution decision with a framework rather than a reference. Let me start with the first, the make versus buy a decision framework for 2026, right? So the default in enterprise AI is used to be build everything, right? So, but that default is no longer correct. And the organizations still operating on that assumption are not misallocating significant capital. So the right question is not should we build or buy. The right question is where does your competitive mode live, and where is merely the cost of entry. Let me give you the framework in 4 quadrants. The first quadrant, like you can say, is buy and integrate. It covers commodity capabilities, the OCR translation, speech to test, email classification, etc. These are commoditized by market, right? The second one is the partner and license. It covers the foundation model capability, the LLM models, the vision foundation models, the specialist vertical AI, and the license access. So this investing fine-tuning and drag on your proprietary data, and you are not in the business of training foundation models, you are in the business of leveraging them with your data advantage. So third one, the build selectively actually covers the context-specific tuning, right? The domain-specific classifiers, internal knowledge models, and the fine-tune on your proprietary data. They do not build on your base model, right? You are standing on the shoulders of $1 trillion foundation model. It's actually investment, it's actually made by others. So you need to use it, right? And the fourth and final quadrant is the build to win, and it is where the defensible mode lives. So your proprietary risk models, your pricing AI, your fraud signals, your core decision engine, this is what you build, this is what you protect, and this is what you should compound. So this is where your data advantage, your domain expertise, and your organization knowledge create value. that a competitor cannot simply license from a vendor, right? So with this, I would like to bring in Amandeep, and he would like to explain about the AI transformation architecture. Over to you, Amandeep.
Yeah. So I just wanted to show you guys the AI transformation, how AI transformation has been depending upon the architecture discipline, because and Arun, what you just described, the build versus buy decision, assumes a level of architectural readiness that in practice that most organizations have not yet reached, and that gap is where many AI initiatives begins to lose momentum. So if you look across a typical enterprise today, there are already multiple AI agents in motion across customer support, procurement, lead qualification, analytics, scheduling, and whatnot. On the surface, the signal progress, but when you examine how these agents actually operate, the system lacks cohesion because very few share context with each other, and very few are coordinated in a meaningful way, and almost none operate under a unified policy of governance layer that can audit end to end with confidence. And I think that is what we have defined as an agent sprawl, and it is emerging as a core structural challenge in enterprise AI adoption. And this is not a problem because people tell that for each business segment, go and use AI, try to onboard AI use cases, and they made their own AI mapping, but it was not related from a structural level, and that's where the agent sprawl problem come into picture. This is I think the architectural shift becomes very decisive because the organizations that will scale AI effectively are not the ones deploying more agents, but the ones introducing a unified AI control plane that governs how those agents operate as a system, right? So they have built some agents, they have so within agents they have multiple agents, so they have smaller control planes, but an entire unified AI control plane that would be followed by a governance layer that is made the focus should be. So if there is one idea to carry forward from this is that the AI value is at scale, it's more driven by orchestration, governance, and visibility, and not by the number of agents deployed. So without that control layer, increasing agents will always increase complexity and not simplicity, and that complexity will quickly become a constraint rather than an advantage. And this was just wanted to put this architecture discipline forward, and with that I'll hand over to Devendra to take this forward into how organizations can begin operationalizing this approach.
Yeah, and Aman, thank you very much, Aman and Arun. I think you've covered most bit of it, and before Aman, I go into my section, I really like the slide that you have. I think that was a very, 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 very easy way of putting across the structure, right? So we should share this with the larger audience at some point of time. So Anish, if you can move on to the roadmap, I think everything we covered today pretty much converges on really one practical question, if I can say, and the question is very simple: where do you start? And the research is really unambiguous on one point, right? One is leaders who act on governance, leaders who act on organizational design, and leaders who act on measurement in parallel outperform all of them, those who do it in sequence. So if you have two leaders, one leader who does all these three things in parallel and the other leader who does it in sequence, the former one wins the battle easily, because this is not really a sequential journey, it's a parallel operating shift, and that's why the roadmap for AI execution pretty much comes into picture. Pretty much three broad buckets: diagnose and align, then you go into redesign and embed, and then scale, and then obviously institutionalize. So very quickly, I won't get through into each of them in detail considering the time we have on scale here, but pretty much in terms of you look at diagnose, you need to look at auditing your AI portfolio, honest assessment on your production to pilot ratio, how much are you moving it to production, looking at where do you draw the boundaries in terms of authority of saying yes or no before it is getting contested in your larger organization, and identify really your top three governance bottlenecks. I think that's the key mantra before it, and then defining your business aligned KPIs for every AI model. When you come to the redesign and embed, I think it is pretty much about your continuous model monitoring for your top production models, the ones where the degradation happens the most, or ones where you have the highest business impact. So pretty much, as I said earlier, converting your governance process from a gated approach to a continuous level approach. and build and present your CFO aligned scorecard to the executive leadership. And on the last bit, scaling and institutionalizing, charter your AI COE that Aman talked about as an internal product team, with really good explicit SLAs that one can define. Apply the build versus buy framework that Arun talked about to every new AI initiative that is a part of your intake process, and then defining really your horizon 1, 2, 3, and ring fencing them with really the right governance model. And to finish this off, setting up a kind of a 12-month AI operating maturity target with a named owner for each one of them, right? So this is kind of a high-level playbook. It is not a transformation in itself. I would call it's a foundation in the structure, and then something that will give you a sustained, accountable value generation operation. So with that, let me close this, and Anish, if you can go on to my last slide. Really in terms of what is the bottom line, what is the execution that we can make as a difference. And I really want to close that with a single statement that I think we as a group believe captures everything that we have covered today. The organizations that will win in 2027 are not the ones with the most AI, not the ones who would say I have got 200 AI models, but the ones who would have with the best kind of execution. We are past the era where AI investment was itself considered as a strategic seriousness. Everybody has AI today. I think where the difference will be is how the execution is happening. And what does execution mean? It means 5 things. And I want each one of you to leave with this as an explanation. AI execution differs fundamentally from the traditional technology deployment. Organization and governance choices, not having tool choices, determined whether AI has scale. Third, the CAIO CDO partnership that Aman talked about is your most consequential organization design decision. They really need to be, in a lighter note, be friends of each other. Fourth, the measurement around AI in the language of CFO and not in the language of the technology team, or else we are going to lose the battle permanently. And fifth, and the most urgently, the 2026 strategy window is open now. It's not open for 18 months or 24 months. It's just open now. So organizations that make the structural decision, the make versus buy that Arun talked about, the governance that I talked about, or the measurement that Aman talked about, it needs to be done in the next, I would say, 90 days and not in the next 180 days. So as I close this section, there are some fine actions for the CAIO, the CDOs, the CIOs, and the COE level. So Anish, with that, we come to the closure of the webinar. I don't think so we have any times, Anish. Do we have any time for any questions at this moment, if any?
Well, see, Devendra, we've been flooded with a lot of questions today. And there is just one question that has caught my attention today, and then I mean, I would want to ask this specific question.
Okay. Let's go ahead. We still have 1 minute on the clock.
Right. So we'll just take this one last question, which is a scenario-based question that has come up, which has caught my attention. So my CFO has given us 12 months to demonstrate measurable ROI on our AI portfolio or face significant budget cuts. We have 14 models in production. Where do I focus and what do I actually show her? I think this is some scenario probably a lot of leaders in this space are facing right now.
Absolutely, Anish. Absolutely. I must compliment the audience. I think they have been very, patient with us, and they have heard through everything that we talked about, and that's why this question has come in. So, I will keep it short. This is exactly the crisis to be in, because it forces, the discipline that should have been there from day one. And 12 months, what this gentleman is saying is enough time. So if you make 3 moves immediately, I think that will work, in my opinion, Anish. And I'm going to keep this short. First is, do not defend all the 14 models, right? I think that's one. The second is, build a counterfactual for each of these 14 models, right? Accuracy is important, but I think what would have happened if the business outcome would not have happened with this model? So I think That is very important to call out. So that's the second part. And third is, Anish, in my opinion, very important is to change the reporting cadence. Stop representing AI performance based on the model to model, but present this outcome on a business outcome perspective. Your CFO does not manage one investment. He or she manages a portfolio. So if we can speak his or her language, I think, Anish, that is what will work out. So you have to cross the bridge to her language or his language, not because he or she will cross your language. That, in my opinion, will hopefully solve the problem.
Thank you so much, Devendra, for answering that. And to all those who raised your queries, we will surely revert back to those via emails. And thank you so much for joining us as we conclude today's session. I'd like to sincerely thank all of you for joining and being a part of today's insightful discussion that we had from our experts. Like they clearly mentioned, today's conversation highlighted AI success in 2026. It's not waiting anymore. It is right now that you take your strategies and move ahead. To scale the ability of governance, accountability, and measurable business impact. We hope the insights that were shared today has given a clearer perspective on how to navigate the trade-offs between speed, control, and the value to drive AI transformation. A special thank to our speakers today, Devendra, Amandeep, and Arun, for sharing your valuable perspectives. And I'm sure these AI leaders who attended today's webinar found it very insightful. And to all the attendees, once again, thank you for your time, thank you for your participation, and thank you for your engagement. Do stay updated with our latest research, our upcoming webinars, and do follow us on LinkedIn, QKS Group, and visit us on our website, qksgroup.com. We look forward to having you all join us in the future sessions. Once again, thank you so much and have a very great evening.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful time.
Thank you. Bye.